Today's storyteller is surnamed Wei, whom we'll refer to as Wei. In Wei's family, there are elders who have always been well-versed in antique collecting. Wei studied ancient Chinese language and script in university, where he achieved excellent grades and was truly a top-notch student. After graduation, he has been working in the publishing industry. In addition to his main job, Wei is also a well-known grassroots expert in the study of ancient scripts in China. He has published numerous articles on ancient scripts, earning him an ascertained degree of fame and influence in the field. Thanks to his family background and his own deep expertise in this area, Wei, despite his relatively young age, has put in a lot of effort and has been recognized by many in the industry, some museums and private collectors. When encountering problems related to ancient scripts, would also invite Wei to take a look and offer his expertise as a technical consultant. In early 2018, Wei suddenly received an invitation from an old acquaintance, Zhu. Zhu is no ordinary person. Just in his early 40s, he used to work at CCTV, but later left to start his own business, which has grown larger over the years. He now owns several film and media companies and has accumulated considerable wealth and connections in many industries. Zhu has a particular fondness for antiques and old objects, since he is in the media industry and knows many people, including quite a few well-known figures in the antique circle. He has a good relationship with them. His love for these items has led him to collect many valuable pieces and gain a lot of knowledge, making him a self-taught private collector. Wei and Zhu got to know each other in 2012. At first, they were not very close, but as they had some business dealings introduced by others, their relationship gradually improved with more interactions. Zhu initially commented on Wei, saying, "Don't underestimate Wei just because he is young. This young man is truly remarkable. He has a deep understanding of ancient scripts. Not only does he come from a family with a rich academic tradition, but he is also very modest, knowledgeable, and down-to-earth, without the arrogance often seen in so-called established experts. It's a pleasure to chat with him." Zhu often sought Wei's advice on issues related to antiques. During the New Year's holiday in 2018, when Wei was on his annual leave, he received a call from Zhu, who wanted him to help take a look at something. Wei could sense from the call that Zhu was very excited, as if he had acquired something extraordinary. People like Wei always have a great interest in new finds in the antique and collectible industry. Zhu asked Wei on the phone, "Do you have time recently?" Wei replied, "I just started my vacation, so I have plenty of time." Zhu said excitedly, "That's great. I'll come and pick you up. Come over to my place and have a look." The place Zhu invited Wei to was his own private collection club. These private collection clubs and museums are not open to the public. Only people within the circle know about them. At the appointed time, Zhu personally drove to pick up Wei. On the way, the two of them chatted. Zhu mentioned that he had two employees in his Japanese company, who specifically helped him collect items from Japanese private collectors. This time, he had acquired some calligraphy and paintings and had selected a few good ones for his private exhibition. However, one collector, introduced by someone else, came to visit and took a liking to a few of these paintings, proposing to exchange them with Zhu for some items he had. This collector had in his possession what he claimed to be Warring States period wooden slips, essentially bamboo slips or tablets. He had acquired these slips at a very low price, but despite the low cost, they still held value. The total number of characters on these slips was nearly 10,000. knowing that Zhu was acquainted with experts in ancient scripts. The two struck a deal. The collector exchanged his collection of wooden slips for the ancient paintings in a barter transaction. Zhu said, "I have a bit of a personal motive for acquiring these slips. I also hope to find someone to interpret the text on them and eventually publish it as a book. At the same time, I'll contact specialized research institutions. With this topic, I can also do a bit of promotion." The two of them chatted away in the car, and soon they arrived at the destination. Wei got out of the car and took a look. The place was really impressive. It was a 3-story villa with an antique-looking exterior. After parking the car, they entered through the door. The hall was spacious and grand, filled with various antiques. Wei's first impression was that it resembled a museum from the movie Night at the Museum. Zhu said, "These days during the New Year's holiday, most of my employees have gone home for the break. Only the staff responsible for logistics are still here. No one else is around. It's just my wife and I living in the bedrooms on the 3rd floor." Zhu's wife, Miss Su, whom Wei had met before, also came out to greet him. She was holding a small pet, a very cute little monkey. Zhu then led Wei into the living room on the 3rd floor. The place was really nice. In addition to the main hall, there were several medium-sized side rooms. On a corner table in the living room, there were some Tang and Sung Dynasty gold and silver artifacts. The silver ones looked a bit tarnished, but the gold ones were shining brightly, showing exquisite craftsmanship and likely worth a fortune. Zhu introduced to Wei. "The collection here is not too large, less than 10,000 pieces, but it's enough to match the scale of a medium-sized museum. These items were purchased from the Hong Kong Jia der Auction House. As you know, for us, it's not just about buying cheap items through small channels. We also need to acquire some more expensive pieces in grand settings to really establish ourselves as collectors. Sometimes we feel that these things are just for show, but it's all part of the game." He continued, "These days, I've just finished organizing this place. In the future, this will be my study. I really enjoy researching these ceramics and calligraphy and paintings. It's much more interesting than dealing with film planning, internet trolls, and buying traffic every day. I'd be happy to stay here all day without going out." As he spoke, Zhu opened a safe and took out a rectangular lacquer box. Inside the box, Wei saw about dozens of wooden slips. The box itself was not ordinary. The pattern on it was black with red accents. Through the cracks in the lacquer, one could see that it was made with a cast-in-place technique, showing its age and craftsmanship. Wei was immediately intrigued by the box. Such a meticulously crafted box must contain something extra. With just a glance, Wei could tell that the wood of the slips was very special, likely Phoebe Genin, a type of golden-colored ninmu, which had turned slightly black due to its age. The characters on the slips were not written with ink, but in red cinnabar, which was very rare. Normally, wooden slips had characters written in ink. These slips were wrapped together in protective film to keep them moist. Through the protective film, the characters were clearly visible. With about 10 to 20 characters on each slip, Wei immediately read out some of the text on the slips. It seemed to be a kind of rhymed prose, short sentences with rhyming words. Upon hearing this, Zhu's eyes lit up. He quickly said to Wei, "This is just a part of it. The wooden slips I collected are in 5 boxes in total. The other 4 boxes are in their original condition, each containing nearly 100 pieces. But the people who dug them up didn't know any better and damaged the boxes. Then they repacked them and the order got mixed up. It will probably be quite troublesome to read them properly. This one here is in the same condition as it was when it was unearthed. It's quite complicated and I'm not an expert in this, you are. Wei replied. To read all of these. It won't be done in a short time, and it might take a few more days for the other boxes. Zhu asked Wei, since you're on your annual leave and have nothing urgent to do, how about staying here for a couple of days? We can chat and I can learn from you. Wei didn't have anything pressing on his hands at the moment, and he was particularly interested in these items, especially when he saw such desirable pieces. He couldn't resist and immediately agreed. Sure, no problem, he said. Zhu quickly arranged for the logistics staff to prepare a separate room for Wei on the 3rd floor. Everything was set up, and Zhu said, this is where you can rest and study these wooden slips. Zhu was very knowledgeable about the industry rules and would offer Wei a considerable sum as compensation. Wei was already extremely interested in the subject matter, and Zhu was someone who was reliable and generous. So Wei was quite satisfied with the arrangement. He could research, learn, and earn some money at the same time. Why not? As they were chatting, Miss Su came in again, holding the little monkey. The three of them chatted casually for a few minutes. During the conversation, Wei noticed that the little monkey in Miss Su's arms seemed restless from the moment they entered. It kept making noises and appeared quite shy. The monkey climbed to Miss Su's neck, trying to climb up to her head and occasionally looking back at Wei mischievously. This scene was quite amusing. Miss Su was both annoyed and amused, saying, "Stop it, what's wrong with you? You get scared when you see strangers. You're such a coward." Zhu, standing nearby, also felt a bit embarrassed and said, "This little monkey is usually very well behaved. I don't know what's gotten into it today. It's acting shy." Wei didn't say much and quickly complimented the monkey, saying, "This little monkey is really cute." He watched as the monkey climbed to Miss Su's neck, its little legs kicking about, seemingly trying to climb over her shoulder to her back. The monkey kept making noises, and Miss Su had no choice but to take it out of the room. Strangely, as soon as they left the room, the monkey stopped making noises. Zhu quickly tried to smooth things over, saying, "Don't mind it. I know this place isn't suitable for such animals. My wife just likes it, and there's nothing I can do." Wei could only smile and say, "It's understandable." With that, the awkward moment passed. After dinner, Wei chatted with Zhu for a bit and then went back to his room to study the inscriptions on the wooden slips. The logistics staff had already prepared everything for him, including a computer and internet access. He closed the door, put on his gloves, and carefully took out a few wooden slips from the water. He opened the protective film and examined the characters on them. After looking at them for a while, he turned on his computer and started writing down his observations. He continued to study, write, and ponder, and before he knew it, several hours had passed. When he checked the time, it was already past midnight. As Wei continued to study one of the wooden slips, he glanced at the batch he had taken out earlier, about 30 to 40 pieces, neatly arranged on a table beside him. But as he looked, he noticed something strange. The red seal script characters on the slips seemed to be gradually fading. Some were only slightly lighter, while others had faded more noticeably. He was stunned. Normally, the characters on wooden slips would only fade after being exposed to the air for a long time, measured in days. Eventually, they might disappear completely. However, if the slips were soaked in a special solution again, the characters could usually be restored over time. So Wei found the situation quite odd. It didn't seem to follow the usual pattern. He thought to himself, "I need to tell Zhu about this. We need to figure out how to handle it together." But then something very unexpected happened. When Wei tried to stand up, he found that he couldn't. He felt completely numb from the waist down. His upper body was fine and could move freely, but his lower body was unresponsive. He had been sitting at the table, studying the slips, and hadn't stood up for a while, but he didn't think that would cause his entire lower body to go numb. He quickly pinched his thigh, but he couldn't feel any pain. At that moment, he was startled. Could he be dreaming? However, he felt very clear-minded, which didn't seem like a dream. But this sensation was strange and definitely not normal. As he was lost in thought, he looked up and saw that his phone was on the armrest of the sofa to his right charging. He thought, I need to grab my phone and call Ju. He leaned forward and stretched out his arm to reach for the phone. But as soon as his fingertips touched the phone, it suddenly rang. He was startled that someone would call him so late. In his nervousness, he dropped the phone to the floor. At that moment, Wei heard a voice coming from the phone. He hadn't pressed the answer button or the speaker phone, but he could clearly hear the voice. It was a very hoarse, elderly-sounding voice, slowly and deliberately saying, turn around quickly." The voice kept repeating, turn around. Wei felt his mind go completely blank when he heard the voice. The voice kept urging him to turn around. He couldn't resist anymore and slowly turned his head to look behind him. To his shock, he saw that at some point, a man had appeared behind his chair. It was a bare-chested, fierce-looking man holding a large machete. Just as Wei's gaze met the man's, he felt a flash of the blade before his eyes and let out a cry. He kicked his feet and suddenly woke up from the dream, realizing that he had fallen asleep on the table at some point. When he came to, he felt a wave of fear followed by relief. Thank goodness it was just a dream, he thought. He was relieved that it hadn't been real. But then he remembered that he had damaged the wooden slips on his first day here. He had no idea how he was going to explain this to Ju. Wei had no idea when he had fallen asleep. He glanced at the computer screen in front of him and saw that it was past 2 in the morning. Instinctively, he tried to move his legs. They had feeling, but they were definitely numb from being in one position for too long while sleeping. He took another look at the phone on the armrest to his right, which was still charging and hadn't fallen to the floor. Feeling a bit more at ease, he stood up, stretched a bit, and after a while, the numbness in his legs subsided. He quickly checked the wooden slips and found that the characters on them had indeed changed. But it wasn't that some of the characters had faded. Rather, some of the characters on the slips had become more vivid. The characters on these wooden slips were written in cinnabar, which were red characters. Upon closer inspection, Wei discovered that dozens of slips had undergone this change. Some had 4 or 5 characters that had become more vibrant, while others had 7 or 8 characters, either consecutively or intermittently, that had darkened in color. Wei was completely stunned. He had been studying and researching ancient scripts and wooden slips for many years and had seen and heard a lot, but he had only heard of characters fading, never of them becoming darker. However, he was very tired at the moment and didn't have the energy to ponder what was going on. He quickly put on his gloves, carefully wrapped the wooden slips again, and placed them back in the water tank. He thought to himself, that's enough for today. I'm too tired. I'll rest now and deal with it when I wake up. He turned off the computer, lay down on the bed, and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, he was woken up by a knock on the door. He looked at his phone and saw that it was almost 9 o'clock. He quickly got up. It was Ju outside the door. He got dressed and opened the door. Ju came in and asked, "How are you? Did you rest well? Are you comfortable here?" Wei didn't mention the strange experience he had. They chatted casually for a bit, had breakfast, and then Ju said, "These days, since it's the New Year's holiday, no one will come to visit. You can stay here without any disturbance. Today, I'm going out with my wife to run some errands and we'll be back in the afternoon. If you get tired or bored, you can take a break. We have a little monkey there. You can go and play with it. It's quite fun." Ju and his wife left, and Wei went upstairs to check on the little monkey. The monkey was very well behaved and was kept in a large cage. The cage was quite spacious, over 2 meters high and 3 meters wide, with small stones, food and water inside, all prepared by Ju's wife before she left. Feeling bored, Wei approached the monkey, intending to play with it. However, as soon as he got close, the monkey reacted as if it had been electrocuted. It let out a series of high-pitched squeaks and pressed its back tightly against the cage, looking extremely nervous, as if it had seen something terrifying. Seeing this, Wei felt disheartened. It seemed that the monkey just didn't like him and was avoiding him. He decided not to impose on the animal and went back to his room. Inside, he looked at the wooden slips, soaking in the water tank. He felt out of sorts. Studying these items was very tedious and required inspiration. Forcing himself to work when he wasn't in the right state would be counterproductive. So Wei didn't rush into it. He sat for a while, and by noon, a staff member came over and said, "Lunch is ready. You should go and eat." After eating, he lay down on the bed, feeling a bit tired and wanting to take a good nap, as he hadn't slept well the night before. However, no matter which way he turned in bed, he felt a chill on the back of his neck. He touched it with his hand, but didn't feel any cold air coming in. It was still very cold outside after the New Year, but the room was quite warm with the heater on full blast, and the windows and doors were tightly closed. So there was no way any wind could get in. Wei lay in bed with his eyes closed and fell asleep without realizing it. But this sleep was far from peaceful. He felt like he had many fragmented and disjointed dreams, all of which were broken pieces of a dream. Sometimes he dreamed that he was wearing armor, holding a spear and fighting desperately on the battlefield. Other times, he dreamed that he was dressed in prisoner's clothes, bound hand and foot, and being led to the execution ground to be beheaded. He dreamed that he was betrayed and had his head chopped off with a broadsword. But all these fragmented dreams had one thing in common. Before the dream ended, there was always a burly man standing behind him, bare-chested, holding a large executioner's broadsword, swinging it towards his neck. Every time the blade struck his neck, he would jolt awake. After waking up, he felt his whole body shivering, and there was a surge of unexplained anger pressing against his forehead. Not knowing where to direct this frustration, Wei felt that it must have been because he hadn't slept well the night before, which led to his bad mood. The last time he woke up, he couldn't bear it anymore. He gritted his teeth, sat up from the bed abruptly, and slapped the quilt covering him. The slap landed on his thigh, causing a sharp pain. Just as he was wincing, he heard footsteps ascending the stairs. He quickly got up and tidied himself up. By the time he was done, the footsteps had already reached the door. There was a knock on the door. When he opened it, he saw that Ju and his wife had returned. They told him that it was time for dinner. Wei was taken aback, thinking that it was time for dinner already. He glanced at the clock and realized that it was already past 5 in the afternoon. He had slept through the afternoon, even though his sleep was restless and he had woken up several times. Ju asked him, "How are you doing? Are you comfortable staying here? Have you gained any insights from looking at these items?" Wei felt quite embarrassed and said, "I accidentally slept through the afternoon and didn't have much time to look at them." He hesitated for a moment, thinking about telling Ju about the changes in the color of the characters on the wooden slips. Ju seemed to notice that Wei had something to say and told his wife, "You go ahead and busy yourself. Call us when it's time to eat." Then he entered the room, closed the door, and asked Wei, "What's the matter? Do you have any questions?" Wei then told Ju about the changes in the color of the characters on the wooden slips. He said, "I felt that something was off. You can take a look and see if you can notice it. The changes are quite subtle." After hearing this, Ju was very surprised. The two of them walk over to the water tank. Wei put on his gloves and carefully took out 5 wooden slips wrapped together. After removing the protective film, he laid the 5 slips flat on a table. Upon inspection, both of them were astonished. Ju immediately noticed that on each slip there were several characters that had become exceptionally bright and vivid, much more so than the others. In contrast, the other characters seemed less bright. This was completely different from the photos that the staff had sent him before. What surprised Wei was that compared to yesterday, the difference in the color of the characters on the wooden slips today seemed even more pronounced. It was easy to see the difference with the naked eye. Could it have something to do with soaking in water for a day? Although Ju was not an expert in ancient scripts, he knew that the color of the characters on wooden slips usually faded, not deepened. This situation was very rare. The two of them quickly took out all the wooden slips and checked each one. They found that about 70 or 80 of them had undergone this change. Neither of them knew what was going on. Ju tried to reassure Wei, saying, "It's okay, this doesn't affect the interpretation, right? If it doesn't affect the interpretation, then there's no problem. You keep working on this. The other 4 boxes will arrive in about 3 days. We'll compare them then and see if the same changes have occurred." Wei nodded and, together with Ju, called his wife to join them for dinner. At the dinner table, no one mentioned the wooden slips. After the meal, the 3 of them chatted for a while. Wei then returned to his room to continue studying the ancient inscriptions on the wooden slips. During his research, he was astonished to find that the characters on the wood, which had become very vivid in color, seemed to form new meanings when combined. They had completely different implications from the original text. He felt that something was amiss. The inscriptions on these wooden slips were definitely not as simple as they appeared. They couldn't just be ordinary rhymed prose and sentences. There must be some special significance. At this moment, Wei suddenly had an inexplicable sense of unease. Why were these characters written in cinnabar? In ancient times, the color red had some special connotations, and many of them represented things that were not very positive. For example, in ancient times, people would use a red pen to write the names of criminals or to mark the names of those to be beheaded with a circle, and they would also write curses. As he studied the inscriptions and looked up relevant information, time flew by and it was already the middle of the night. Feeling sleepy, he quickly wrapped the wooden slips and put them back in the water, turned off the computer, and lay down on the bed. He was lost in thought and eventually fell asleep. But this time, in the middle of the night, he didn't know what time it was when he was suddenly jolted awake. When he woke up, he was lying on his back. At that moment, he seemed to hear the sound of many people moving around in the room. The room was pitch black. Wei tried to get up and turn on the light, but suddenly he found that he couldn't move. It was as if he was experiencing sleep paralysis, which hadn't happened to him for many years. He didn't know why it was happening again. Lying in bed, he couldn't move at all. He felt as if there were many people around him, their faces very close to his, staring at him at close range. He could sense their heavy breathing and feel the breaths they exhaled on his face. He told himself, "This is not right. It must be all an illusion. The brain and the body are not in sync. My consciousness has woken up, but my body hasn't. Don't scare myself." Wei closed his eyes tightly and told himself not to be nervous. After a while, he suddenly felt a thump on his chest, as if someone had struck him hard. He jolted awake and found that he could move again. He sat up quickly and looked around, but there was no one there. However, by the faint streetlight from outside, Wei saw a small dark figure crouching on his chest. He was so frightened that he let out a cry. As he cried out, the little creature nimbly leapt away. Wei quickly turned on the bedside lamp and saw that it was the little monkey belonging to Ju's wife, standing by his bed. At that moment, he realized that the monkey was facing him, baring its teeth and chattering incessantly, constantly waving its monkey paws. Wei was bewildered. Why had the monkey come to his room? He quickly glanced at the water tank, relieved that the monkey hadn't tampered with the wooden slips inside. However, the little monkey seemed to be very agitated, jumping around and waving its small paws, chattering and appearing very upset. Wei noticed that the monkey was forming a hand broadsword shape with its paws and repeatedly slashing at its own neck, making a petting gesture towards him. Wei was completely puzzled. What did the monkey want to do? Why was it making such gestures? The monkey was getting more and more frustrated, jumping up and down by the bed, constantly making the beheading gesture with its paws. At that moment, Wei suddenly noticed that the door to his room was open. He had locked the door before going to bed. It was double locked. So, without a key, it should have been impossible to push the door open from the outside. But now the door was wide open. How had the monkey gotten in? It couldn't have opened the door with a key, could it? He sat on the bed, looking at the open door and the monkey gesturing by the bed, feeling very uneasy. Just then, Ju came in. He had heard the commotion and quickly saw that the monkey had escaped. He looked at Wei and immediately asked, "Wei, what's wrong? You look quite pale. Is everything okay?" Wei shook his head. Ju quickly picked up the monkey and nodded to Wei, saying, "I'll take it back and settle it down first. I'll be right back." Wei sat by the bed and took a deep breath to calm down. After a while, Ju returned and asked, "What exactly happened?" Wei rubbed his head and said, "I feel something is off. I think I might need to pause this work for a while." Ju was taken aback. "Is it that serious? Don't worry. If you're tired, take a few days off. We're not in a hurry. It's fine." Wei immediately recounted everything that had made him uneasy over the past few days, including the changes in the wooden slips, the strange dreams he had been having, and the monkey's beheading gestures towards him. He told Ju, "I don't know if I'm just imagining things, but I feel like all these incidents might be related to the wooden slips. The inscriptions on them are definitely not as simple as they seem. I've looked up some information and suspect that there might be some hidden symbols or something among them." Ju was very surprised after listening to him, but he reassured Wei, "Don't worry. I really had no idea this would happen. Let's stop studying these for now. Tomorrow I'll bring an old friend over to help you. He should be able to tell if there's any problem or not. Don't worry and don't overthink it." That night, the two of them moved the water tank and the wooden slips out of Wei's room and placed them in a corner of the third-floor living room. Ju told Wei to rest early, and the night passed without any further incidents. The next day, Ju didn't continue discussing the wooden slips with Wei. Instead, he showed him around the villa, showing him some of his other collections, such as ceramics and calligraphy and paintings. It wasn't until the afternoon that a guest arrived at Ju's house. When Wei saw him, he was a man in his 60s, quite fat, with a big belly and a round face with a double chin. He looked quite jolly. At first glance, this man bore a resemblance to the famous Hong Kong action star Sammo Hung. Ju quickly introduced him to Wei, saying, "This is Hu. He's an old friend of mine." Wei hurried over to greet him, but who frowned upon seeing Wei and said something that startled both Ju and Wei. He said, "Young man, there is a broadsword resting on the back of your neck." Hearing this, Wei felt his hair stand on end and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He instinctively touched the back of his neck, but felt nothing unusual. Who said, "Young man, don't be nervous. I'm not trying to scare you. I've known Ju for many years, and he's told me a bit about your situation. You'll tell me the details later. It shouldn't be a big problem, so don't be afraid." Who continued, "By the way, you mentioned those Warring States period wooden slips. Bring them out. I'd like to take a look. I don't understand ancient scripts, but I need to see if the problem really lies with these items." Ju was very respectful towards Mr. Hu and immediately agreed. "All right, I'll go get them." Wei recounted to Hu all the strange experiences he had had over the past few days, including the nightmares, the sleep paralysis, and the monkey's antics. Hu listened attentively, nodding from time to time. Soon after, Ju came back wearing gloves, holding a dozen or so wooden slips, which he placed on the table. Hu took a look and laughed, saying, "There's no need to bring out so many. I don't have the knowledge to read these characters. Let me just take a look at one." As he spoke, he stood up, found a pair of gloves, put them on, and carefully examined one of the slips. He even brought it close to his nose and sniffed it. He then said, "It's settled. The problem lies with these wooden slips. Although I can't read the characters, I'm certain that the red ink used here isn't just cinnabar. It's mixed with human blood and other potions. Wei, you've been in close contact with these items for the past few days, and you've been affected by the negative energy emanating from them. The monkey in Ju's house is sentient. It's not afraid of you, but of the broadsword on the back of your neck. Last night, it was the monkey that warned you." Only then did Wei understand. The monkey's baring of teeth and chattering, as well as its gestures of beheading, were all meant to alert him. No wonder he had been dreaming of being beheaded and feeling a chill on the back of his neck. He felt a wave of fear wash over him. Ju also asked Hu, "Is there any way to resolve this? Wei is here to help me, and I didn't expect him to encounter such a situation." Hu had a very relaxed expression and said, "Don't worry. It's not difficult to solve this problem now that we know the root cause, although Wei has been affected. Fortunately, it hasn't been for long, and these wooden slips are very ancient. The negative energy has already diminished significantly over time. As long as he stays away from these items for a while and goes home to recuperate, he should be fine." Hearing this, Wei felt a bit relieved. Hu continued, "As for studying the inscriptions on these slips, there's actually a very simple solution. Why don't you just take photos of them? You don't have to hold the actual wooden pieces to read the characters. You can read the text from the photos, can't you?" Ju, however, looked quite troubled and said, "But these items themselves are no longer usable. They need to be disposed of, which is a pity. Also, will these items in my house have any impact on me?" He thought for a moment and asked, "When these items were unearthed, they wouldn't have been like this, right? They should have been stored in some boxes or containers. Are those containers still around?" Ju replied, "Yes, there is a lacquer box with patterns and inscriptions. Let me get it for you." With that, he stood up and quickly left the room. Who, standing by, shook his head and chuckled. After all these years, he's still the same. At his age, you'd think he'd be a bit more composed. Wei felt a bit awkward and didn't know how to respond to their conversation. After a while, Ju came back with a lacquer box, the very one that had been used to store the wooden slips. Who examined the box while wearing gloves. Yes, this box, in addition to protecting the wooden slips, has patterns and inscriptions that act as a kind of talisman to suppress the negative energy from the slips. If you store the wooden slips in this, it should not affect your family. As for dispelling the negative energy, I need to think about it more. There are many methods, but finding one that doesn't damage these items is a bit more challenging. I'll give it some more thought. Who said, "Oh, by the way, young man, are you still here tomorrow? If you are, I'll bring you something when I come over tomorrow morning. Wear it and you'll be fine after resting at home for a few days." Don't worry. Both Wei and Zhu thanked Hu profusely. Zhu insisted on having dinner with Hu, but Hu declined, saying he had other matters to attend to and would come by again the next morning. Afterward, Zhu had his driver take Hu home. Back in the house, Zhu kept apologizing to Wei, saying, "I'm really sorry. I didn't expect this to happen to you." Wei didn't take it too seriously and said, "It's already been resolved, hasn't it?" The two of them chatted for a long time, that day discussing more about the industry and not dwelling on what had just happened. The next morning, Hu came over again and gave Wei a small peachwood sword, saying, "Carry this with you for a few days." Wei took it with both hands and examined it. The small peachwood sword was exquisitely crafted, about the length of a shout with a red string tied to the hilt. After returning home, he carried the peachwood sword with him at all times. Since then, no strange events or nightmares occurred. His annual leave ended and he returned to work at the publishing house as usual. Later, Wei heard that Hu had come up with a method to dispel the negative energy from the wooden slips. The slips were to be placed in distilled water, and the water tank was to be exposed to sunlight for a while. The tank should be placed in the sun for a few tens of minutes in the morning and afternoon each day. This method, it was said, would ensure that the wooden slips themselves were not damaged, while also dispelling the negative energy. The exact meaning of the characters on the wooden slips, when read together, has not yet been fully deciphered, and Wei hopes to continue his research in the future. We also hope that he will have a smooth and fruitful journey in his upcoming work.